lacking one member of council to reach quorum. So according to the procedure bylaw, we have until 1:15 for that individual to arrive. And if he or she does not, we will call the meeting and adjourn. Thank you. So stay tuned. Netflix probably has something really interesting right now. We have not heard from Councillor McMath. Mayor Tate is not available today, and Councillor St. Pierre could well be racing over on his e-bike as we speak. Okay, so we're 1 minute prior to our deadline, and we have reached quorum. Welcome, Councillor St. Pierre, and we're good to go. So I'll call the meeting to order at 1:14 and make a acknowledgement now that we're gathered today on the traditional territories of the Sooke and Chianu nations. With appreciation, gratitude, and respect for their stewardship of the land over defined as time immemorial, which in the historical record is 12 to 14,000 years. So on that note, we'll move to approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion for that? Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Beddoes.
If I may?
Yeah.
Just a reminder, we are at the committee of the whole, so only a
That's correct.
mover is required.
Always. All right. So Councillor St. Pierre has moved that. Into reports. So the council code.
We also need a vote.
Oh, we do need a vote. So all in favor? That's a 4-0 unanimous vote. Okay, we're now moving into the today we're going to talk about the council code of conduct. This is a check-in. Council requested regular check-ins when we adopted this code of conduct last September. And here we are 6 months later with the first of these good governance opportunities. Thank you very much to our corporate officer for organizing this today and give us all a chance for some reflection and conversation. And I just want to give a quick background refresher on this code of conduct process. It's interesting, the district was an early adopter of ethics, harassment and bullying and safe workplace policies in 2011. Port Moody was the first BC local government to create a code of conduct. That was in 2017. I think I'm losing some of you already here, but in November 2021, the province passed the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, and one notable change therein was the insertion of a requirement into the community charter that all municipalities in the province within 6 months of a local election decide whether to enact a code of conduct. So that was an optional thing. Sooke passed our own code on September 9th last year. As of last fall, 70% of elected governments in BC have some kind of code of conduct in place since 2022. So with that context setter, for those who are not aware of those details, over to our corporate officer.
Thank you very much. I prepared a presentation for council to begin our conversation about code of conduct. This report and presentation are intended to provide an opportunity for council to discuss the application of the Code of Conduct bylaw and address any emerging conduct issues or concerns. The goals for this meeting are to discuss the application of this bylaw, ways to build open and trusting relationships, and how to manage change. Building trusting relationships among council members is essential. This involves addressing conduct, conflict, and collective blind spots that can hinder productive decision and discussions. By fostering trust and open communication, council can work collaboratively and make well-informed decisions. This next slide provides a high-level overview of the content of the Code of Conduct, which has 4 main parts. Its application, which only applies to council and committee members, conduct requirements, the procedure for informal and formal complaint processes, and information about adjudication and reporting. In addition to having a code of conduct, it is best practice to have regular check-ins to discuss its application and address emerging concerns. As a refresher, the purpose of the Code of Conduct is to promote and advance responsible conduct and governance, committing to the foundational principles of integrity, accountability, respect, and leadership and collaboration. Sections 7 through 10 of the Code of Conduct more specifically outline conduct related to each foundational principle, as well as general conduct provisions. Regular council check-ins also play a vital role in building social capital within council. Social capital refers to the networks, relationships, and norms that enable collective action and cooperation for mutual benefit. Essentially, social capital is the glue that holds groups together, enabling them to work collectively towards a common goal. A prominent political scientist, Robert Putnam, introduced the concepts of bridging and bonding, which are both essential components of social capital. Bridging explains how to create connections with those that may be different or unfamiliar to you, where bonding is the act of deepening connections based on similarities. Effective governance requires a healthy balance of both bridging and bonding, promoting collaboration and innovation by providing a space for diverse perspectives. For example, perhaps a member and another member both believe that classical music is the best genre. They bond over that shared view, discussing their favorite composers and attending concerts together. This creates a strong connection between them based on their common taste. Alternatively, perhaps another member has a different opinion and prefers jazz. All members can acknowledge their differences and discuss their favorite music despite their different tastes. By being transparent about their different views head-on, members can build a bridge over their differences and strengthen their relationship through mutual respect. This approach is not just about agreeing to disagree. Rather, it's about engaging in meaningful conversations to understand each other's perspectives. It ensures that all voices are heard and valued, which is essential for effective governance. Yes, Councillor St. Pierre?
I'm just curious, given that this is a cow and this is, for the public, the bridging bonding feels like it'd be better done over beer. Or, in a more informal context, are we intending to be doing that sort of thing today, or is it really just more of an overview of all of this material?
Thank you for the question. So the purpose of this check-in is to provide a space and an opportunity for council to discuss such matters, as well as provide a refresher on the code of conduct. Thank you. And the next slide discusses why social capital is core to governance. Social capital is crucial for effective governance for a number of reasons. Trust is a fundamental component of social capital. When council members trust each other, they're more likely to engage in open dialogue and participate actively in the democratic process. This open dialogue facilitates better decision-making and builds public trust as citizens see their representatives working transparently and collaboratively. High levels of social capital among individual council members also leads to better cooperation. This cooperation is essential for effective decision-making as it ensures that policies are implemented smoothly and community goals are achieved. Additionally, bridging social capital among individual council members helps resolve conflicts by promoting dialogue and understanding. This approach aligns with council's code of conduct, which emphasizes maintaining a positive work environment and addressing unacceptable behavior. Lastly, increasing social capital enhances resilience by fostering strong relationships among members. Communities with high social capital can better adapt to changes and challenges. In summary, social capital is at the core of governance because it builds a foundation for trust, cooperation, and active participation. Now let's take a look at the change management process. This diagram outlines the key steps that council should follow to ensure a smooth and effective transition. We'll start by acknowledging that council has already established ethical conduct through their council code of conduct bylaw, which sets the foundation for ethical leadership. Next, conflict should be addressed both informally and formally to prevent any disruptions. Throughout the process, building social capital is crucial because it helps create strong connections within council and provides a respectful dynamic to discuss different opinions. Once conflicts are identified, they should be resolved fairly and effectively. Finally, this process is intended to ensure responsible and ethical behavior from elected officials, fostering good governance and maintaining public trust. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions about this presentation or the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bagnall. Questions, gentlemen? Okay, so Councillor Pearson.
So Code of conduct. I guess the problem, or another problem, I won't say there's a problem because that sounds like it's a negative state of start. The code of conduct from around the council table. I mean, we all unanimously agreed that code of conduct and it's the intuitive piece that it feels like that it's directed at council, right? And their behavior is what's in question. When 95% of the time or 98% of the time, the conflict or the code of conduct seems to be from outside of our control, like where the code of conduct is being pushed or the boundaries are being pushed. It's coming from, and I dare say it, that it's the public, it's the people outside the organization, because I find inside the organization, we're able to resolve most issues timely, fast. It doesn't fester, it doesn't boil over. There should be healthy conflict within any organization in discussion. It doesn't mean it has to be disrespectful. I mean, we got to stay on that side of respectful. But what tools do we have to hold other people who come into our chambers or come across our communication to a code of conduct? What's very frustrating, and we did pass a resolution somewhere along the line in the last 7 or 8 months to push to AV, ICC, and UBCM, is to have faster resolution, because that's also an issue. We've got people violating potentially, I shouldn't say really, but it's never been investigated outside of our organization. So that's a statement, and I don't really think I have a question in there. What other tools are available to us within the code of conduct? I mean, committees, council, staff, I think we're doing a reasonable job of that interaction. Reasonable. I don't think it's perfect ever, but I also think it's pretty darn good. Some of the organizations that I've seen, but there's this other third party that we seem to come up against.
I believe I can speak to a piece of that, and that is the other policy tools that we have to ensure that respectful conduct, is adhered to by all interactions. So first, I will say that our employee respectful policies and respectful workplace policies does apply to interactions from the public to our employees. We have a legal requirement to ensure that employees are not being bullied or harassed, and that includes by members of the public. So we've had discussions to recently review that language and potentially see if there's any gaps where we could communicate better to the public that they are also held to that standard with our employees. But that is the policy tool that comes to mind as far as protecting our employees' mental health and well-being as far as respect. The tricky thing comes when we're talking about elected officials and members of the public. Protections such as work safe policy doesn't necessarily apply to elected officials, but other social legal conventions does apply, as would to individuals. You have a right to be free from being harassed on the streets, just like any Canadian citizen would be against another Canadian citizen. We don't have any protocols in place for that type of interaction, and I don't know that there's no solution to that, but one doesn't come to mind. And the third dynamic, I would say, is the conduct of the council chambers. So in council chambers, the chair or the mayor does have the power to expel any member who is being belligerent and does not have respectful conduct. So when someone is on the property and is having outbursts of any nature, we do have a protocol to expel them and get police assistance when required.
So, and thank you for that answer, because I think that's meat and potatoes of how we should be connected. So, what about when we actually do we have a tool in the toolbox to end our meeting, as an example, a public meeting? We've advertised, we've said, okay, our council meeting is going to be on March 17th at 1 p.m. and somebody comes in the door and starts being disrespectful, not only to council, but to staff and from physically, which is not our role. Do we have the right to postpone the meeting at that moment?
Absolutely. At any time, a council member may wish to move to adjourn, and that is a subsidiary motion that would take precedence over all other motions. So even if there is a motion on the floor, an amendment on the floor, even at that time, a motion to adjourn can be placed on the floor. It has to be seconded and voted on, and that would end the meeting.
Okay, so again, does that adjournment, does it have to be unanimous or does it have to be majority?
My understanding is it is majority.
Okay. Good answers, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearson. I'll just note, yes, the council procedure policy has a very clear statements around improper conduct under item 32. This code of conduct, of course, does not include staff. It's strictly for council and committees, and I believe staff in your long-term game plan, you do have a staff code of conduct being considered. Can I ask that question?
Yes, we do have elements of conduct in other staff policies, such as a respectful workplace policy and other IT use policies. And that has been something that has been discussed. In addition, we do have a council policy that is about staff conflict of interest, which is code of conduct-esque. But we do not have one central apples to apples code of conduct for staff. And that was discussed when the council code of conduct was brought up for council's consideration, noting that staff is reviewing that in their broader administrative policy review, and that is something that needs to be considered under the lens of union wording as well as labor relations legislation and policy.
Good. And I think back in those conversations last year, I noted Esquimalt had introduced a management policy for dealing with disrespectful patrons. And they've also introduced a code of conduct for patrons and visitors to Esquimalt Town Hall. Questions? Councillor St. Pierre.
I have a few questions and most of them have to do, are we looking directly to presentation right now or the entire body material that we were looking at? So let me get at that question out first.
We can certainly entertain any questions, or council can have a discussion with themselves about the first staff report. There are two other staff reports separately, which we'll address.
Okay, so because I'm not sure, right now process was, I'm not sure what we're discussing. Is this now the forum for that open discussion amongst ourselves, or what's going on here? Is this where we're at?
The spirit of this report today is so that council had an opportunity to check in with each other on code of conduct, any issues. And I'm also here to answer any technical questions on code of conduct or the presentation or the staff report.
Okay, so one of the things that came out clearly in the material we were presented with was that it was way better to deal with things informally rather than formally, and to ideally build up that social capital, by bridging and bonding and so on and so forth. And that's all very good. But another section that I saw was that more serious issues would be when there were direct attacks on staff, the organization, or council members. So that was also clear that that was actually a more substantial immediate issue that might need more than informal and so on and so forth. I'm struggling mightily here because I wish that there were more of us here. And I'm not sure where to go with this in terms of, potentially saying things that I shouldn't. But let's just say that I think that there is less trust when there's less opportunity to build trust. And at this point, I think many of us might be experiencing a lack of trust due to the absences of certain council members. And I don't know what we're supposed to do about that sort of thing because that person's not here.
That'll be
I'd
coming
love
up.
to rebuild trust,
Yeah.
but it's how do you do that when they're not here and they're not even here for the conversation? So I'm kind of like, okay, what now? Because that was something I might have been hoping to talk about today.
I think we could perhaps discuss that under 4.2 when there is a discussion around this responsible conduct resource administration grant that would be going. We'll get to that. So this discussion around our needs in terms of current conflicts that we may identify.
Mm-hmm.
this section, I think we're looking at a more general sense of the code of conduct. Excuse me.
If I may, the intention of this item is so that council has an opportunity to discuss.
Let's get to it. Let's discuss this.
But can we without, I don't know.
I think we must, given that we are the four who have gathered today for
All right.
we have quorum. So I guess the opening question is, I don't believe any code of conduct violations from this council have been brought to the CAO or corporate officer in these last 6 months.
That's correct. No council member has brought forth a conduct complaint.
So prior to the formal approach, of course, is informal. And I guess the question is, how are we can speak to our own direct engagement with each other, managing in terms of this extended family? Councillor Pearson.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Oh, sorry, hang on. I've been, I guess for me is I've been on 3 different councils with 3 different makeups, 2 different mayors, several different councils have taken place. I find this council to be largely very respectful. I think there's differences of opinion and it gets kind of, a little spicy sometimes or whatever, but I think at the core group that's making the decisions aren't always unanimous, which I really fully appreciate. There's votes, they take place, and I never once hear a hangover from a decision. I may go away and kind of grumble or something about, but I don't hear people in win and loss, which I've heard on different councils. I don't see grudges being held. I hear, spicy conversations at different times, but me personally, I think that given the makeup of this council, largely respectful, and it's changed a couple of times. I mean, we lost one to be an MLA. We've got people in different phases of their life attending when they can and when they can't. We've got potentially our leader herself disappearing, and there's some things that are intrinsically, I would believe, cause stress. And I think that the core group of councillors that are here are doing a fantastic job from a conflict and resolution point of view. I really do. I think it's code of conduct been actually really good. My former organization, which I stopped talking about, hopefully, was a demonstration in where code of conduct needed to be in place because of that ongoing relationship. And I don't see that and don't feel it here at all. It's really actually pretty cool. Yeah, no, I actually do. I actually enjoy being on council with this group of councillors. That's my take.
Okay, thank you. Microphone. So yes, Councillor Beddoes is up next. I'm sorry, I missed you in the.
No, it's
queue there.
okay. It's I'm not feeling 100%, so I tend to be a little bit grumpy. So this is not a great time for me to talk about this sort of stuff. But I'm just interested in the complaint process. If I have a problem with one of the councillors, I'm from a different school. I am not about to go running to the CAO because I don't think the CAO is our employee and should not be the one that's mediating that. If I have a problem with the councillor, I should be going to the mayor. What is the procedure exactly? I mean, I don't want to start looking it up. I mean, Jeff has all this stuff under his belt, but I don't. Could you give me a rundown, please, of what the procedure would be? Let's say I'm upset with Councillor St. Pierre about something.
Absolutely. So there is 2 pieces, the informal complaint procedure and the formal complaint procedure. It is always suggested that a council member or committee member approach things informally one-on-one with the member so that they can address it and hopefully reach some resolution on a one-to-one basis. If a member finds that is not an effective way to seek resolution, then a complaint would be formally made to the CAO and the corporate officer jointly, or one or the other, if it involved one or the other. And I suppose if it involved both, we would just essentially have a lawyer be the recipient of the complaint. The process at that point for a formal complaint, as together the corporate officer and the CAO would look at the merits of the complaint under the specific wording of the bylaw, and either conduct an investigation ourselves or reach out to a legal representative to do it on our behalf, again, based on the scope and the merits of the complaint. After an investigation proceeds, if an investigation is warranted, then a summary report would be submitted to council with recommendations from the investigator.
I guess we're having a problem there is staff's involvement in this. As like for me, if I had a complaint with Councillor St. Pierre, I might need a mediator to just come in and work with both of us to resolve that complaint, which to me is a pretty good way to go. But I'm not quite understanding why, you know, how it involves you to investigate that. I mean, it just seems to me that it's backwards. So I can't say I'm pretty concerned about that, actually. So I don't know what it makes you. That's the only mechanism, is the complaint to our CAO.
And, through the chair to the committee. So this practice is based on the procedure and the bylaw that council adopted as a whole. It doesn't mean that that's the only process that could have ever been adopted and could be something that council wanted to revisit. This process was taken from the city of Kelowna, who was one of the foundational code of conduct bylaws that were adopted, that it had a comprehensive process for handling these complaints and procedures. Again, it is not something that council, has to live with forever. If that's something that council wanted to review, if it wasn't working for them, we can certainly do a bylaw amendment. However, that is the wording of the bylaw as it stands.
I understand. I just find that would be, to me, it'd be unfair for the CAO to be involved in a conflict between two councillors, which are basically form the body that he or she works for. So it seems a little odd, but anyway.
I'd like to ask a question.
Can I? Okay, I'll follow up with.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to add context, because this actually came up at the LGMA CAO conference I was just at. And one of the topics we talked about was the code of conduct, and this exact concern you raised, Councillor Beddoes, was raised by multiple CAOs there, going, it kind of puts us in the middle of some things that maybe we shouldn't be in the middle of, but should we, to try and help facilitate. Anyways, there was no actual, there was no takeaway, answers to this problem. I think everyone just identified this could be a potential problem. And with this being so new to most of the municipalities, the thought was, let's let them, play out for a year. And at the next conference, we'll all check in and see how it's worked for municipalities. And then as well, see how it's worked from the province, because some of the other larger municipalities really feel like this should be maybe a provincial oversight thing, versus if you want to actually have teeth in it and actually have it to be enforceable. So it was, because it's also new for so many munis, everyone's kind of just trying something and see how it works. But your concerns were definitely valid and raised.
So I'll just make a couple of notes here. I think this code of conduct was created for a full spectrum of possibilities. And I think that informal piece where in an example would be you and Tony having a chat about some differences between you. And if indeed that was unsuccessful, then there is the next steps to proceed with. And I think the province introduced this given a rising tide of dysfunctional local councils. And we had every term, there's a new set of examples. And I think in the large, if I said 70% of local governments have adopted these, I have no idea how many of them are being actively utilized, but it's there as a background, not just for this council, but future councils who could have any number of potential interpersonal conflicts. So yes, Councillor St. Pierre, you were going to say.
I was going to follow up on what Councillor Beddoes was saying, because certainly the informal process is recommended. And I think that what I'm hearing is that right now staff would only get really involved, or I shouldn't say staff, district resources would only be involved when it went to a formal process through the CAO. But I think what I'm hearing through Councillor Beddoes is, are there any resources prior to the formal complaint process through the CAO that we can touch on to, for example, mediate a meeting in a more informal way before we actually start expending all those resources in a much more, is that, am I?
Yeah, you hit upon something there, because, Kevin mentions his other world, but I have a world with Lions, and that's exactly what we do, is that we have people will go into an area and resolve conflict by just getting people to sit down and talk. But we don't seem to have that process that, it's whether Kevin and I set off on something. Sometimes it's, to me, it would be good if a third party was available there. Say, just a second, you're being unreasonable, you're being too sensitive. Can we find some middle ground here? Which I found in the past, in the conflicts, it works really well. But we don't seem to have any of that. It just seems to be a formal complaint process, and then we throw the CAO in the middle of it, and God help her. So yeah, I just, we're working through this. I understand that. I'm not, super critical about. We all should try and get along. I understand that, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of checks and balances that actually assists us to try not to get to that formal complaint. When you put something in writing in a formal complaint, the whole world changes. And to me, if we had some sort of mechanism that, maybe we'd say, well, we're going to ask the fire chief to come in and see if he can mediate between the two of you. Not because he's a genius or anything like that, but it's just that, you got a fairly intelligent person that could sit down and say, oh, look, you guys, this is what I see, and then find some middle ground. So I don't know, maybe we should look at some sort of a process like that.
And this is following what Kevin was saying. I think we also don't have opportunities for informal meeting. So I know that previously we had done barbecues like years and years ago and so on and so forth, but really we talk about, informally resolving things, but when the hell does that happen, and when do we have an opportunity? When things get heated, then you try and create an opportunity for an informal meeting. Good luck. I think that sort of thing has to be kind of baked in before you actually start having issues, or at least something has to be in place, because otherwise no chance to do it. So I love the informal piece, but I think there has to be scaffolding to support it, either through what Councillor Beddoes was saying or what Councillor Pearson implied. There's not enough there to support informal resolution. And I think that often, like Al is saying, the formal complaint process is so fraught with peril and gravitas that you might just let something slide more than you want to or should, because you don't want to get into it. You don't have the real opportunities with support to take care of it informally. And so you don't want to go to the formal, and so the thing just lingers and festers. I think and I think I agree with Kevin. We have, I think, quite a respectful relationship. People mostly make a decision, move on, come back ready to make new decisions and ready to talk about them. That's the way it ought to be. I agree completely. But I'm also thinking in terms, again, of what Jeff was saying, future councils. How nice would it be if future council actually had baked in opportunities to be informal with each other, chat informally, potentially have support if things get, a little spicy. So I do think there are gaps in terms of the code of conduct, in terms of the processes and resources available at this point in time. And yeah, that's all I had to say.
Okay, I've got, I note here it's section 21 of the code, informal resolution. I think we can easily amend this document to add that piece that you're mentioning, Councillor Beddoes, of some sort of mediator option that the district could arrange prior to this becoming a formal complaint. Because as it stands, 21.1 states the two members must, can attempt to informally resolve. And then 21.2 tells us we need to move forward to a formal complaint. So we need a new 21.2 that offers this option. What, corporate officer?
If I may, I might suggest that if that is the spirit of what council would decide as a body, not to do a bylaw amendment, because that doesn't contradict the wording of the bylaw, but potentially have a policy to assist council in informal complaints and potentially a budget that council passes so that we could get external support and mediation, again, to keep that separation between staff and council.
Do you know if there are any other local governments that have any mechanism for informal meetings where they don't worry about things like, you've got quorum? Like, is there something that anyone among staff or knows of for actually managing informal touch-ins, like the ability to just get together with people and, like I said, beer, I think, or whatever, coffee, beer, like some kind of social setting, I think really ideal. But is there anything at all? Or nobody talks to each other outside of chamber? That's, I don't know. Sorry, it's like what?
Sorry, but yes, through you to, Councillor St. Pierre, Councillor Pearson, St. Pearson.
And just, in the discussion, listening to the ballot points that came from Councillor Beddoes and Councillor St. Pierre, as well as Councillor Bateman, would we ought to be better in the informal stage to turn it over to somebody else in the organization as opposed to the CAO? Because we have an HR manager or HR director, manager, who ought to be trained and well-versed in conflict resolution, I would think, from an HR point of view. As the initial contact. Because the CAO is really, to Councillor Beddoes' point, is really in a dicey situation. If you have to make a decision to tell, Pearson, you're an idiot, go apologize to Al. There's a reporting structure, a reporting hierarchy there that shouldn't carry a grudge, but it eliminates that potential grudge if it was turned over to, because I think in our organization, an HR person is a career professional. I think, but the third party is, ultimate, but then it costs us money and it costs the taxpayers money. So if we had somebody else in the organization, because the HR person doesn't directly report to council, only the CAO does. So that feels a little bit, to Councillor Beddoes' point, that feels a little counterintuitive to me to have that person coming in as a conflict, in a conflict resolution piece. Just words for thought. Could we, I guess my question to you, corporate officer, could we, in that stage, 23.2, is that what you said it was? 21.2A.
Yeah.
Have an initial contact that maybe the informal resolution could be reached really easily, but there wouldn't be any form of bias between an employee and employer. Thank you. Question. There is a question.
So yeah,
I will note that Councillor St. Pierre's question is unresolved, but I will answer the most recent question first and then take a step back. It is certainly possible, if that's the direction of council, in adoption of a policy, to have the manager of HR support informal processes. It's speaking to Councillor St. Pierre's question about informal meetings. That is a complex gray area within councils and municipalities across BC. I'm not aware of any specific informal meeting exactly how you have framed it. I am aware of governance workshops and consultants coming in. As the corporate officer, I would have to make a determination on the legality of the meeting based on the exact specifics, based on the ombudsperson best practices for open meetings.
okay, so we are moving forward here towards a policy statement, it sounds like. And hopefully someone will make a motion on that. Well, I think we're talking about seeking informal mediation support from the Director of Human Resources. If indeed that is not contrary to what Ms. Bagnall said earlier about needing some complete distance from staff. Yes, through me to you.
If the committee would be amenable, staff would propose that the motion be that the committee of the whole recommend that staff provide a report and a proposed policy for informal processes so that council can consider the options available.
Okay.
I'll make that motion. I'd make that motion, that council or that committee of the whole make a recommendation to staff to present options for informal mediation.
Just with a slight tweak that the committee of the whole make the recommendation to council to direct staff to
Yes.
provide a report on an informal policy, informal complaint process policy.
And I have one technical question. Is our director of HR or manager of HR, I'm not sure, was it manager? Manager of HR, is that an exempt position?
That is.
Okay, excellent. That's perfect. Thank you.
So yes, Councillor
Through the
Bennett.
chair, just when you, when we pass that motion, I suspect we will. Excuse me, the mayor needs to be in that process. The complaints should, to me, if we have a complaint, it should go to the mayor and the mayor request the mediation. Oh, well, that's true. Then, yeah, okay, but that needs, I want it looked at. You're gonna take this away and try and come up with something that's workable. I just think that, I look at the governance here and the mayor is actually chairing council. So, I think that anything should go through the mayor's chair or who's ever doing it. And then done it that way, but that's just for information.
Thank you, Al. Councillor St. Pierre.
Just to clarify on what Councillor Bettis was asking, I personally don't know one way or another whether it's useful or appropriate at all times to include the mayor in the process. I have to say that I see benefits and issues on both sides. So I hope that report will look into that, but I personally don't have I have a sense that it could put the mayor in a sticky position themselves. They don't necessarily want to know what's going on there, and they might want to be able to continue to be unbiased in terms of proceedings and so on and so forth. And at the same time, they should know what's going on with their counselors. But I think I'd love to know in terms of what actually works, what would be appropriate there.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We don't have it on the screen, but do we need it on the screen? Oh,
Was there briefly?
okay, this is being moved by Councillor Pearson. We'll have a vote. Yeah, we'll vote on that now, please. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, we still haven't moved out of this this item yet, and I wanted to check in on some of the slides that Ms. Bagnall presented, this importance of social capital. So here's one of the points. A functional, effective council will have goodwill, fellowship, sympathy, and social interactions. Now, I would echo what Councillor Pearson was saying. We have great goodwill, I think, fellowship and sympathy among each other. We don't have a lot of social interactions, but I find that those, back in the day, there were some barbecues and those were useful. And of course, we attend the various staff functions. So I think there is some significant social capital among the group, four of us here. There are, I feel that personally that we are an extended family, as I said earlier, and so we bring our various issues, personal styles together as a group. There have been some, at least one issue for me anyway. It happened in camera, and hence I will not speak about it. But it causes me concern to this day. So perhaps as we move to the next item on the agenda, we could look at ways of turning and addressing that, what I find is still a bit of an elephant in the room when we're all at the table. So having said that, the social capital creates trust, enhanced cooperation, the resiliency and adaptability. I think we're batting pretty good average here. Ted Williams, at least 400. Can you imagine that? 400 batting season. We're higher than that, but there is that one issue that I find I personally would like to see some further discussion and resolution around.
The old days of castle, just go get a big round of beer set.
The good old days. It's not permissible. So I guess unless we have any further questions or comments at this stage, we might yes, Councillor Pierce, St. Pierre. We're all interchangeable.
At the risk of bothering myself, I still don't know what we can do about when there's many absences that have created, I think, a lack of trust. And I don't know what to do about that. And I don't know if there's anything to be done, but I would like to briefly discuss it and see if the wisdom of council has anything to offer, because it's just hard to develop social capital when the person's not there. That's all. And without the additional time spent together in chambers, working together cooperatively, yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling like there's something there, and I don't know if it's something we can actually offer, or if there's anything within local government that does anything for this sort of thing. I just feel like it does affect how well we can function. That's all. But I'm not sure what to do about it.
Well, I think this next item on the agenda will give us an option for a path forward. And hence, I'd like to close out this item at this point, if we're complete. I think it was for discussion, so we need no motions. We'll move on to item 4.2, Responsible Conduct Resource Administration Fund Grant Application. So over to our CAO or corporate officer to provide us some background on this.
Thank you. Through the chair to the committee. This report is being presented to the committee of the whole as very timely. There has been a grant opportunity through the Local Government Management Association to provide funding for councils who declare that they have conduct issues at the elected official level. This would provide funds to administer governance training or potential opportunities to process conflict issues. This would be at the staff level submitting. It is a relatively new grant opportunity, hence there is no attachment to this with the grant information, as at this time it is just being sent towards staff at the staff level. The criteria is for small local governments less than $50,000, as well as applications are to be channeled through the chief administrative officer. If council provides a resolution of support, that would provide support and credence to the applicant or the application through the CAO.
So questions on this, Councillor St. Pierre?
Is this where we could get funding for the informal process potentially? So for example, for that mediation or whatever other supports might come out of a report. Is that what we're looking at?
Absolutely. The guidelines are specific in the way that council in the resolution would need to state that there is conduct issues at the elected level. But the funding is broad in its application as long as it's related to addressing those conduct issues.
So that would include, as per the bulk of the previous report, things like, training in fairness or whatever else might assist, along with supports for staff to help with conflict resolution and mediation, so on and so forth. So if we had a robust sort of structure around the informal piece, this would assist with that and potentially address sorry, Chair Bateman, or Your Worship Bateman, I don't know, it's always so confusing.
Yeah.
We'll worship you.
Yeah.
As their worship was suggesting, that could assist with the tougher questions that we don't quite know how to wrangle right now. Is that, yes?
That would all fit under the grant stream.
Perfect.
Councillor Beddoes, you have a comment.
Yeah, I was sort of going back the other, but to deal with this too, like if we had some grant money, I've heard that this group here say that there is some trouble. And we don't seem to have a mechanism to actually discuss it at length, but we have had in the past, we've had a workshop, a governance workshop, where all the councillors and the CEO were there, and we aired some of the things that were bothering it as a council. Can we not do that with some of this grant money, or? I mean, going back to Councillor St. Pierre's, I know what his issue is, and it drives me crazy too, is that we don't some days know if we have even quorum, because if you're not able to make a meeting, you should be contacting the mayor or the CAO and said, we're obligated as elected officials. I know you get some leeway, but at least to let people know that, hey, look, I can't be there, I won't be there, I don't want to be there, whatever it is. But I mean, I don't know how many times now in this last couple of months, I don't know whether I'm going to stay here because I don't even know if we're going to have quorum. And I think that's an issue. We talk about good governance and conduct and respectful to each other. I think that would be something if we had some grant money to do and have it out of what our expectations of each other are. It's frustrating to me, myself and Councillor Bateman are here 99.9% of the time. And so my other two colleagues here are very punctual as well, but it's not always the case. So it's frustrating to me. So I'm just opening that up. Is that something, if we got this grant, that it could do for us? We could get an outside consultant to come in a governance and hash it out. Or maybe it's too late. Maybe we need an election. I don't know.
Yes, that falls under the grant and
That the committee of the whole recommend that council support the application to the Responsible Conduct Resource Administration Fund to address conduct issues at the elected level. And I just made the motion. That's all it's needed.
Councillor Pearson?
I think we've still got one more section to go.
We do.
We still have one more section to go, and I'll bring up what I I'll vote on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll make a couple of comments. Just to be clear, we have been managing effectively. Life is imperfect, and we have carried on. We've done the business of the district. And I think it's important to understand that. There are, these are nuanced complications. When you said conduct issues, well, there are lesser and greater conduct issues. And I think it's important to notify the LGMA that our issues here, we're managing to a degree, and yet it's always important to be striving for better outcomes. So yes, with all that said, let's have a vote on that. All in favor? Okay, thank you. So we're now moving to item 4.3 on the short agenda, repealing Code of Ethics Policy.
And thank you. This report is being presented to the committee as council adopted the code of conduct bylaw. The intention was to repeal this policy at the same time of adoption, which was an oversight. So staff is just recommending at this time that council receive Code of Ethics Policy 2011 as the substance of the policy has been concretized into bylaw.
So that's pretty straightforward. If you have questions, Councillor St. Pierre is moving this motion.
I think this is just one of those things where we've replaced and superseded a previous piece of policy with something better and more complete. And now we want to get rid of the dregs so it doesn't mess us up in the future. So that's it, you know. Let's do it.
Okay, any further comments? Just note that, as I said at the outset, that Code of Ethics policy was back in the day, which is only 14 years ago, was if not trailblazing, it was among the early adopters of these kind of documents. So hats off to previous councils for recognizing existing issues around harassment and bullying and other matters that were dealt with at the time. So let's have a vote on that. All in favor? 4-0. I don't believe any. So we'll have a motion for adjournment. Oh, you were going to say.
Well,
something.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it really qualifies under new business, but it sort of lumps all of this together and I've kind of thought about the issue that was discussed around and around attendance. And I've kind of wrestled with it myself. You know, what does it mean to be a counselor? What are their expectations? What are the capital investment that you get between each other? And it's difficult, to echo what some of my fellow counselors said. But then I kind of stepped back and I started thinking about it is that as long as there's a governance, there's the local government charter covers that, right? As an example, I was away for 2 meetings in January or February, and then I had to come in sick to make the third meeting because there's a point at which the Local Government Act takes place and counselors can be removed based on their attendance. And we ought not to try and supersede that. I get the personal conflict piece of it, which I'm listening to my fellow counselors, but there's a governance model and there's also an electorate that is out there and people get elected through the democratic process based on their performance as a counselor if they're running for a second time. And the public has that final say. So when a counselor has a chair here, they're entitled to full privileges of that council. That's just the way that the Local Government Act reads. We can wish and we can hope and we can do all of those things, but at the other end of the day there's no violation of the Local Government Act. That doesn't mean that we don't have our own personal feelings and opinions, and I don't disagree with sometimes with that capital investment because it does make it difficult. But is that territory? Because it feels to me sometimes that we're wading into territory that we ought not to. It will come forward in its own way and be taken care of in its own way through the democratic process. But just a comment at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that but there is, we're talking about the relationship between us here. And I find it disrespectful that, for instance, if you're not going to make a meeting, I think that you owe it to me to let me know, or us as a group. That's all. I mean, when it comes down to the number of meetings you can miss, and if you never do a cow, well, that's really up to the electorate. It's, they can decide that. But it just, the conduct between we have with ourselves, and that issue is causing some strife, and maybe that should be discussed and saying, please, whoever, let us know in advance. So.
I concur.
Yeah.
I concur with.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
just
on the
want to
same page.
verify that, yeah.
Just that sometimes it feels like we're getting onto that other edge. But anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre.
And I agree with the importance of what you said, and I agree with everything you said. And there's not that nasty little but I'll put it in there anyway. At the same time, that's, I think, where the informal process comes in. We don't step on the toes of the LGA, and we don't step on the toes of the electorate. But when there is an erosion of trust because of, something that's going on, I think that's where the informal process really does come in, to ideally be able to address it, build those bridges, do some bonding, figure out how we can make it work better. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it work better. The reason to work through the informal piece, first and foremost, especially with something like this, is ideally to find common ground, have a better functioning council, and move forward in a better way. I don't think that this specifically doesn't step, I believe, on the privileges you were talking about. It actually tries to make use of the informal process simply for us to do better. Yeah. Okay. So I just to clarify that piece a little.
Okay. And I'll close by adding, this mediator consultant that potentially we will have at our disposal if this grant is successful. I had earlier mentioned matters in camera that to me is the major issue because as Councillor Pearson says, the procedure guidelines very clearly state when a councillor's attendance record is problematic. This is a much more nuanced, complicated matter, in my opinion, that I just wonder, given that it occurred in camera, does that not make it, we can't really openly discuss this with the mediator? Earlier.
There's certainly an opportunity to strike confidentiality agreements with consultants to come in and work with council on items that are not subject to open debate.
Okay, and we'll have a vote on that. All in favor? Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Bagnall, for that opportunity today.